That sounds interesting. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe I'm blowing smoke up my own butt. Do you know that people used to blow smoke up people's butts when they died? Because one time it worked. So they had those kits everywhere for a while. It happened once to somebody because the ashes were mildly hot. And so when it entered their rectum, it basically sent like a surge of pain through their system and it woke them up. I'm sorry, this has to happen now. Blowing smoke up butt. The tobacco smoke enema. There it is. We humans are weird. I think it happened to somebody who drowned. And I love the fact that someone was like, oh, blow some smoke up their butt. Now, interesting fact learned kind of recently. So apparently they found out, I think it's with pigs specifically, but they have the capability to, I don't remember exactly the science behind this, but they're technically capable of mildly sustaining oxygen in their bloodstream through their butt. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's very strange. Essentially, a pig could be submerged underwater, and as long as air is kind of like being funneled into its butt, if I'm understanding the science correctly, it can technically survive for a longer period of time because their large intestine is also pulling the oxygen out and is like moving it into the bloodstream. And it's fascinating. It's insane that someone thought that this was possible and that they tried it, but it's that I just find things. I don't know how I find things. And how did they find this out? Probably the same way that people stuff freaking tobacco smoke up somebody's butt and they woke up and they're just like, brilliant. I'm not saying it makes sense, but it is a thing. And it's weird, but it's interesting. Essentially, there's some thought process that potentially... Ooh, what is it again? I believe the general process for the research is to figure out a way to make this work with human beings, specifically from the perspective of somebody who had a sudden loss of oxygen in their system. And it's basically the idea, like, you know how an enema, when it comes to water, is actually potentially an emergency hydration? It's much like an IV, like a saline drip. Because, like, a saline drip technically is like a hydration thing, right? This is basically that version, but from an oxygen perspective. It's very preliminary research, but it's essentially a way that they're thinking that this potentially somehow, if they can understand how it works and how they could make it work on people, it would be like an emergency way to get a decent amount of oxygen into the bloodstream for somebody who's been denied oxygen for a long period of time. Essentially, instead of like forcing their lungs to start working again, this could be a way to essentially be like, okay, while we're trying to get them to start breathing again, we're also going to put oxygen back into their lungs so that we don't get brain damage. And whether that works or not, that's fascinating. Like, that is an insanely interesting concept of just being able to be like, oh my God, this person is not breathing, whether their heart has stopped, whether there's a, like a blockage in their windpipe, whatever it might be. Somehow this person is not getting air and we're not getting it into them fast enough because we can't do it on the fly. Like emergency response people would not be able to do it quickly enough, potentially, especially if they've been without oxygen for, let's say, 5-10 minutes. That's dangerous because the brain does not deal well without oxygen. It dies without oxygen. And just the idea of us finding a way to basically force some oxygen into the blood temporarily to give people a fighting chance, I don't give a fuck how weird that is. It's still fascinating to me. I just hope that they're not torturing pigs trying to figure this out. That's the only part that I'm worried about. Anyway, back to the game. Ramble over, I promise.